Hey guys, Zen here, and can you believe it's already been a year since Ubisoft decided to remove the ACOG from both Bandit and Jager? I found it kind of satisfying that they decided to tweet about this because, as you could imagine, a ton of people had a lot to say about it and weren't very happy that they decided to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of this massive change that ended up happening to the game. Now, I wanted to take the time in this video to kind of go over the change as a whole, look back on the past year of Jager and Bandit not having the ACOG scope, and find out if it was actually a positive change for the game as a whole. But I actually wanted to start this conversation off with the SMG-11. Now, this is an automatic secondary weapon that is super popular in the meta and pretty much always has been. As a lot of you guys know, Smoke is one of these operators that has access to this secondary, and if you're not using his shotgun, 9 times out of 10 you will definitely be using his SMG-11. Now, for those of you guys that may be new to the game or are just getting started, you may not have known that the SMG-11 used to actually have an ACOG scope, and for the longest time it was pretty much the meta. Of course, Sledge being the other operator with access to the secondary, you had this meta on both attack and defense of the SMG-11 as well as a shotgun combo. So basically you had the best of both worlds. With the shotgun, you were able to have close range, close quarters combat, as well as being able to open up hatches and walls, but then on the other hand you had the SMG-11, and it had the potential to shoot long range because it did have that ACOG, and at the time it didn't really have that much recoil, and it was definitely very easily managed. So people were able to pretty much always have an answer for the attacking team, because if they decided to get up close, you had your shotgun, and if they wanted to peek angles, you had just as much of a chance as they had with your SMG-11. And of course, with Siege having that golden rule of one-shot headshot, it was very easy to accomplish with that SMG. So of course Ubisoft removed it, and now you have all the other sights minus the ACOG scope available for that secondary. Moving forward with the SMG-12, you now don't have the option of an ACOG on that as well. So I think in general, Ubisoft wanted to kind of hone in on making secondaries feel more like secondaries and not so much like primaries. And when you have that ACOG scope, it definitely makes that viable option for you to be able to use that secondary as a primary. So in general, I think that's more the message that they wanted to send across by removing that ACOG from that weapon. Now, I reference this because it shows a major shift in how Ubisoft started to look at defense in the game. And it really did put the ACOG scope on the map as something that wasn't just a scope and wasn't just another option. It was definitely a sight that had a little bit too much utility on certain weapons, especially secondaries. But now we can talk about Jager and Bandit and some of the reasons why the ACOG was actually removed from them in the first place. Now, Jager and Bandit are both 3-speed operators, and for the most part they kind of work the same. Outside of the Bandit trick, your main objective as either one of them is to pretty much place down your battery or ADS system and then go and roam around the map. Now, I do know some Jager mains and some Bandit mains that anchor, but for the most part, these two are best for that close range roam. You don't really want to be too far out with them like you would be with, say, Vigil or Caveira, but with Jager and Bandit, you simply want to place your stuff down, get out of the objective, and start picking off as many attackers as you possibly can. Now, there's one way that is probably the best at doing this, and that is spawn peeking. And if there's one way to make a sweaty Rainbow Six Siege player extremely angry, spawn peek them. Jager and Bandit became notoriously known as the spawn peeking operators. Pretty much on any map that it was easily and readily available, you would have a Jager or a Bandit peeking through a window just waiting for you to come out of spawn. And this made things really easy, particularly for someone like Bandit. Instead of having to sit there and do the Bandit trick like we all do now, simply spawn peek your thermite, get him down, and you really don't have anything to worry about. And if I remember correctly, this was still at a time where the ranked and casual map pools didn't differ that much. You still had access to Canal, you still had access to House, and these maps were very easily spawn peekable. So I think in general, Ubisoft really didn't want these 3-speed operators who were very easily able to do everything they had to do on the objective, run off, find the perfect window, kill 1 or 2 or even 3 attackers on their way in, and and then just simply rush back to the objective with that 3 speed. It just was way too easy, and so I think that was a major part in reasoning why Ubisoft decided to pull the ACOGs from both of them in the first place. It didn't change everything, and spawn peeking is still definitely something in the game now, but if you really think about it, if Jager and Bandit still had access to those ACOG scopes, especially in a meta like this with some of the new maps that we've had introduced like Villa and the new Clubhouse rework, there are a lot of windows and places that are looking outside that are very easily spawn peeked, and right now, especially on Villa, when you spawn outside where the balcony is, there's always someone on that window across the map that's shooting and waiting for you to come out of spawn. And imagine if that was a 3-speed operator able to go from that window to the balcony window and just quickly move back and forth. With ACOG scopes, it would make it that much easier for them to get those kills early on in the round. And even as it stands now, with someone like Doc or Rook just waiting there, it's very difficult to actually get a pick on them when they're standing in those windows and shooting at you. Now, pretty much at the same time that we lost Jager and Bandit's ACOGs, we also learned of a brand new rule that Ubisoft wanted to usher in, which was basically only allowing 3 armored defenders to have access to ACOG scopes in the future. And this would extend across all operators that will ever be introduced into the game. And this was definitely the part of the update that I have always disagreed with most. And here's my reasoning why. I feel like when you design an operator from the ground up, whether it be on offense or defense, there will be certain attachments and certain gadgets, secondary gadgets, that work well and become this unified experience for that operator. And I feel that when you automatically create this blanket rule that says this kind of operator or this speed of operator cannot have access to this scope, you kind of break that synergy in a way. And then you have those operators that meet the criteria like Mira but still don't have an ACOG scope. Mira is a 3 armor operator. She doesn't have any sort of crazy gadget that wouldn't work with an ACOG scope, but for whatever reason her vector just doesn't have access to one. And this also is replicated by someone like Tachanka, another 3 armor operator that doesn't have access to an ACOG scope. Even if he is a Russian operator, they do have an ACOG scope, and I think that that would be an excellent way to buff Tachanka and make him and his turret a little bit more viable. His gun not having an ACOG scope hurts him because it would definitely make him a better and more suitable operator, and then obviously his turret, I think it would make a ton of sense to give that also an ACOG scope, because as it stands now, it has no sights and it can be very difficult to be accurate with it. So I know there are those out there that feel there is no hope at all for Tachanka, but maybe with a couple of slight additions like that, you might see his pick rate go up and you might see people actually using him and enjoying him in the long term. On the flip side of that, I look at an operator like Legion, who's a 2-speed 2 armor operator, but his main utility is to be an anchor and wait for all of his goo mines to come up and then throw them around the objective. With an operator like Rook, you have the exact same secondary gadget options with the impact grenade and the deployable shield. You have a pistol in the secondary and that same anchor style gameplay, but yet Rook has access to ACOG on 2 of his weapons, and of course Legion doesn't. I don't want to ramble on for too long about this, but I've always found this to be a very strange design decision, and I'd really like to understand the core reasoning behind why only 3 armor operators on defense can have access to the ACOG scope. Now, the last thing that I wanted to discuss is the possibility of the ACOG ever coming back for Jager or Bandit, or I guess 3-speed operators as a whole. Just being honest with you guys, I don't think that we will ever see the return of ACOGs to Jager or Bandit, and I think that we've just been proven this with this kind of tweet. Jager and Bandit not having ACOGs is obviously something that Rainbow and Ubisoft are celebrating. It's something that at every chance they get, they kind of nudge it in our face that, hey, they're gone, they're not coming back, and you can pretty much stop begging for them. There are even community members out there that are so desperate for this change that they've created petitions with thousands of signatures just to have the ACOGs returned on these operators. At this point, after all the tweets, after all of the memes, the signatures on petitions, and everything that has really encompassed this topic, if we have not convinced the developers that this is a change that we want to see brought back, then I don't think that this is something that we will ever see. And honestly, I think the devs are really happy with the state of the meta, the state of that part of the meta, and their decision as a whole when it came to this particular subject. If it were up to me, I probably wouldn't bring back the ACOG to Jager and Bandit per se, but I also would alleviate that rule that only 3 armors on defense have access to the scope. I just think that if that's going to be the blanket rule, then that should apply to all of the 3 armors, including Mira and including Tachanka, but I also wouldn't limit future operators' design fine to not allow the ACOG scope, because again, I think when you have that perfect synergy with an operator and it makes a lot of sense, everything just feels better to play and everything just comes off as a more polished product in the end. But that's everything, guys. It's been 1 year since the removal of ACOGs from Bandit and Jager, and those are my thoughts on it. Now I want to hear from you. Would you give back Jager and Bandit's ACOGs? And do you think that the change has been a beneficial thing to the game overall? Let me know everything in a comment down below. If you did enjoy this video, please drop a like and subscribe with notifications if you're new. With that being said, it's been Zen.
Hey, I'm out.